So one of the topics that consistently keeps coming up, both in our research conversations, especially over the last year, is plant sourcing. So one of the statistics that Josh Tetrick, the founder of Just, mentioned at our September virtual event really stuck with us. And I'm sure it's something that you've heard a variation of before, which is the food industry currently uses less than 1% of the more than 390,000 plant species available on Earth. So sourcing and utilizing new plant species, especially those rich in protein, has a huge plethora of benefits, both commercially for our health as well as the planet. But there's also an important conversation to be had around scaling existing options as well. And so today I'm delighted to bring together 3 alternative protein leaders from ROQUETTE, Ripple and TYSON Foods to share their insights into the areas and detail how they're working tirelessly to improve the scale and breadth of what is available. You probably know the drill by now, but for our new audience members, it will follow our typical webinar schedule where we'll have a presentation from each of our speakers, followed by 2 questions posed to each of them from you, the audience. So please do post your questions in the Ask a Question section located at the bottom of the feed. Lots have already been posted, so thank you so much for those. You can also upvote these questions, so the more upvoted the question, the more likely that will be asked. We also have a couple of polls going on as well, so please make sure that you cast your vote there. Having your take on the most promising plant-based protein sources, as well as the biggest hurdle in formulating products. So really interested to hear your views on that. And then after the presentations and direct questions, we'll have a group discussion, which I'll lead, and I'll incorporate some of those final live questions until we wrap up on the hour. Please feel free to also use the comment section to encourage productive conversations as you are, introduce yourself, or just give some good old-fashioned support to the speakers. If you do experience any technical issues as well, please comment on this chat and one of our team will be able to assist you. So without further ado, I would love to welcome our first speaker to the stage, Jean-Philippe Azoulay. He is the VP, Head of P and New Protein Business Lines at ROQUETTE. And he's a future food tech veteran. So Jean-Philippe has a vast international experience of leading different businesses in various sectors, including plant health and food ingredients. He's lived in numerous countries around the world, and Jean-Philippe has a global view of the challenges facing the food system and the agricultural sector. So welcome, Jean-Philippe.
Oliver, thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. And what a great topic. Let me share. Oliver, if you help me, tell me when the screen is coming through.
Yeah, perfect. We can see
perfect.
that.
Very good. What a great topic. We are indeed, it's such a critical topic. We are indeed going from, transforming, from originating, the grain. You're asking what's the impact of plant-based trends on our sourcing, and then how do we make this, how do we react to these trends? And actually, we are really going from originating grain to transforming the way we source strategically to make it, more sustainable, more reliable. That's a complete turnaround. That's a complete different way of looking at how we are doing this sourcing of plant-based ingredients and therefore of agricultural produce. I'll cover this piece, and then I will, before introducing our next speaker, I will lead to the protein diversity. Now, I think we're all familiar with the challenges, right? We are looking at those two major challenges. The first one, 7.5 billion people today, very likely to be 9 billion in 2050, in 30 years. And that's a huge challenge. That's, 7.5 billion, 12% still undernourished. The number is going down, or at least the percentage is going down year after year, which is good. But we do have a major responsibility to provide nutritious food as plant-based goes mainstream and increases. So that's a very, very big responsibility. We need to have a reliable sourcing, reliable supply chain. Just think of COVID, the pandemic, the crisis that we are going through now, where we have a responsibility to maintain the supply chain and to keep nourishing our people. It's just as simple as this. The second one, of course, agricultural sustainability. That's also a very, very big challenge. It's not new. It's become very visible in the previous, in the past, in the current years. We all know that we have to become more and more sustainable as we produce. Now, I think it's important at this stage to maybe to specify a bit more sustainability when you look at agricultural production. We always think of environmental sustainability, and that's good, that's normal, that's number one priority. But if you truly want to have a sustainable food production, we also need to look at the economic sustainability, something which is going to be economically sustainable. Otherwise, it will just take forever. It will take subsidies, it will take billions. And you also need to look at social sustainability. It's something has to be accepted by society. And it doesn't matter if we are against a technology or in favor of a technology. If you don't have social acceptability, it is very difficult to have sustainability. So all of this forms a package which is now being impacted as we are looking at the impact of the plant-based protein trend. So plant-based food for food production. I will start with cropping. As a company like ROQUETTE, we were pioneers in this space. I think we cannot say we invented, but we started this market with pea. And if you look at pea, the crop itself, how sustainable can you be? You have a crop which is grown in rotation, best practice. You have a crop which requires very little fertilizing, if not at all, because it will capture nitrogen from the air and put it back to the field. You have a crop which requires very little chemical, no water. It's grown in dry areas, and therefore less energy, less fuel for the tractor and everything else. And then again, doesn't matter the technology, if you are against or if you are for the technology, but in some areas of the world, GM is an issue and pea is non-GM. So the choice of the crop itself is a very important choice when you look at serving this market. You can have the best possible crop. You also need to have the best possible practices. Now, if you look at this slide here, I think it describes well what we are doing in ROQUETTE and why we are doing it. You want to have the most sustainable farming practices of all. And if you live in an area like Europe, where you have, unfortunately, a lot of farm bashing, then this is even more important. And we are doing this together with our farming community. It starts with the field, the seed. What seed do you use? Mr. Farmer, can we do it together? Can you buy certified seeds? Can you track everything you do? So we expect full traceability from the seed producer to the farm, to the field, then to the silos and the manufacturer, all the way to the end consumer. Can you geolocalize? Can you use precision farming techniques? We are encouraging the use of precision farming techniques where your field is going to be plotted square meter by square meter, so you know exactly what's happening on the field. You know what's being used and how well healthy the crop is. So this entire space is a space where we are very demanding, and we do this together with our farming partners. And economic sustainability, we recognize the farmers for it. We compensate them, right? So we are going to pay a premium together so that you can farm in the most sustainable way. And then we also are going to recognize it by going for certifications. So the Sustainable Agriculture Initiative is a body which will certify that your farm is a sustainable farm. And this is something that we encourage very strongly with ROQUETTE. We started from scratch. And today, more than 80% of our farmers in Europe are SAI certified. And of course, the target is 100%. And we do this again with the farming community. Farm better. Let's do it together. So from the beginning to the end, we can improve on sustainability. On the right-hand side here, you have the improvement, also very important. Today, we are farming in a sustainable way. Tomorrow, we want to do even better. So we are cooperating from an R&D standpoint with companies like Equinom. We have a partnership with Equinom to discover together the next generation of seed, which will make it possible to farm in an even better way. And then Protein Industries Canada, we have a new plant opening up in Canada. It will be available opening up first quarter of next year, improving farming practices and social acceptability. You might not go for organic, or you might go for organic. It doesn't matter. This is something also which is an expectation from society, and something we are developing as ROQUETTE, as a leader, as a pioneer, to also improve the sustainability approach of our production. And then finally, location, very important. Our plant in France is located in the middle of the pea producing area. Minimize footprint, minimize energy, and get as close as possible to your farming community. Our plant in Portage in Canada is located in the middle of the pea production area of the number one pea production country in the world, Canada. And again, close to your raw material. And we didn't do this, randomly or just for cost reasons. We did this for sustainability, for all of this strategic approach, which is so important for a company like ROQUETTE. And on top of this, of course, your number one markets are Europe and the Americas, and your plants are there in the middle of your most important markets, close to your customers. If you look at the sustainability from a reliability approach, you want to maintain the supply chain up and going, even in a difficult period like now. What is better than having your plants close to your raw material and close to your customers? Then, if you look at the protein sources, so the crops that we are growing, this is a summary history of vegetable proteins. You were mentioning, Oliver, in introduction that there are more than 300,000 species and we are using very few of them. That's correct. I guess this is a law of nature. When we start eating insects, it's probably going to be the same. From the millions of insects, we probably select 5 or 6 or 10, and then this is what will be consumed. The first two, soy and wheat, the historical protein crops, or let's say vegetable crops, still today represent more than 90% of the total consumption, human consumption. And then you have the current protein crops. Some of them are legumes. We have selected pea. We are working on a few more of those. And then you have the next generation, canola, hemp, fava bean, chickpea. Those will be growing. They will be introduced in the in the future, and they will probably grow for the next 50 years. And as market leaders and as pioneers, we are also, of course, developing some solutions. We just launched our first product based on fava bean, and this is also a way of going for more sustainable, better connections between those different protein sources. Here, the secret of this diversity, of course, is how do you combine? And this is where, as a community, we are working together with customers and with companies, such as the companies that we have today on the panel, so that we can put our expertise together and see how we can use all this diversity of crops to find the cuisine of tomorrow. we're not doing this just to sell a bit more. Of course, this is a consequence. We will sell a bit more, but it is so important to have this diversity of crops so that we can together bring this to the market. Remember that food, of course, has to be nutritious, but food is also pleasurable. It's a source of pleasure, and for us, this is absolutely critical. You need expertise to invent new foods. Today, we are replicating existing food. We are also starting to invent new food. We call this a new cuisine, a new gastronomy. You see more and more chefs putting their brains together and then just using their creativity to cook with our ingredients. And this is where expertise is key. We have today two great companies on the panel with great expertise. As ROQUETTE, we are the market leader, and we are the expert also at giving you what can be done with the ingredients that we provide, and to help all of our customers to bring this new cuisine to the market. So, Oliver, I hope this answers the question, and I'll be happy to take questions. Oliver?
Questions that have come in.
Okay.
You were talking about obviously the diversity of plant-based ingredients and inputs, and so what plant protein source will be able to meet demand over the next 5 years, and then what are the sources that will emerge after that? So I'm guessing it's going to be a combination of lots of different inputs from lots of different players within the space.
Right. It's that's right. I think many of them will be able to meet demand. We are plant protein space now is for food, right? We are nourishing, we are feeding humans, right? So many of them will be able to meet demand. But that's a right question. If you look at sustainability, it's all I've said, but it's also about availability of the crop, right? So we are looking at rice. I mean, you are looking at the major crops where we know the farming community is ready. You have the hectares, you have the production. So rice will be there, mung bean will be there, fava bean will be there, most likely sunflower, oilseed rape. So you have a number of crops, but there are the crops that we know today. Now, how many very small crops will be able to come into the mix and participate into this diversity that will help us as a community to create new foods? This is probably something still to be discovered.
Okay, great. And I think something that's on a lot of people's minds as well is compared to the traditional meat industry, how has the plant-based supply chain fared during COVID?
Well, I'm very pleased to, it's been a very stressful period. We won't hide it. I think you've seen what happened throughout the food chain. Now, we've never interrupted our supply chain. If I look at ROQUETTE, to my knowledge, the entire plant-based ecosystem has been able to supply. We've seen some issues with the traditional meat. That's it's very unfortunate. We were lucky not to have those kind of issues, so we were able to supply. We were able to continue running. I'm not saying that we didn't have disruption. It was tensed. It was tough. We had to focus on market continuity or supply continuity. But I would say that the plant-based meat has fared very well in this COVID crisis. Now, remember, this is a industry in the formation, right? It's small. It's maybe easier to do this in a small industry than in a large one, but we fared very well, I think, as plant-based during the COVID. And the COVID crisis is not over yet. It's something we have to be ready to deal with probably for the next month. And therefore, the practices we've learned in dealing with the crisis have now been put in place, and they are giving us, I would say, even more sustainability in the sense of reliability than we had pre-COVID.
Hello, everyone, and it's wonderful to be here today at the Future Food Tech Seminar. So I am honored to be here. I've seen a lot of familiar faces on the audience, so it's great to see you and have you be a part of this conference today. As Harshal may mentioned, I am my background here is I'm the Vice President of R&D for Ripple Foods, and I'm going to give a bit of a presentation today about how Ripple is using technology as part of our sourcing strategy. So honored to be here, and let's get going. So I'll share my screen. Okay, can everyone see that? Or maybe one of my teammates can give me an okay.
Andy, it's okay. All the way to Lille, France.
Okay, wonderful. So again, I want to give some detail about how we use technology to enable sourcing strategy. But I realize that not everyone here may know who Ripple Foods is. So I want to make sure we start there because it carries a thread to the entire conversation about how we approach sourcing. So Ripple, our mission is to make plant-based foods delicious. We believe the smallest actions have far-reaching impact, and we believe strongly in what we call the ripple effect. You know, food should taste great and nourish your body, absolutely. But what's important for us is to make sure that it leaves a small footprint on the planet. And that is critical for how we think about sourcing and how we go about our business. So one of the things that we pride ourselves on is what we call the ripple effect. So if you go to our website, which is ripplefoods.com, you'll see this ticker that comes on the screen that shows you how much we do to, like, for instance, save carbon or save water with every bottle of Ripple plant-based milk that we sell. And that's the first part of how we address, you know, our sourcing, because there's a lot of agricultural sources out there. And we started with peas, for instance, because it has a great impact when it comes to saving water, as opposed to like an almond. Nothing against almond, I love almonds. But when we come to looking at the different sources to go after, sustainability is a huge metric for us. And this is a metric we have internally to ensure that we are doing our part for the environment. Now with Ripple, we started with milk only 4 years ago, so we're relatively new. And we've been out there for 4 years, and we have this lineup of about 5 wonderful tasting plant-based milks. The ones that are the highest sellers for us are unsweetened original as well as the chocolate milk. And these products are have 8 grams of plant-based protein. Currently, they're coming from peas. Smooth and delicious, but also lower sugar and more calcium than dairy milk. But most importantly as well, too, is that they're allergen-free. And that's an important part of another kind of way we go about sourcing. We want to make sure that we're sourcing things that can cater to that community who's looking for allergen-free products. Hence, one of the reasons why we chose pea initially. But we've been busy. So Ripple has grown a bunch in the last 4 years, and we've introduced many more products outside of just our core 48-ounce milks. My son, when he was going to school and not working, not at home, he was taking the kids' milk we have in his lunchbox every day to school. We have half and half in creamers. We have high protein shakes. And then we have a barista style milk, but also the one that I was very excited for that we launched just recently was ice cream. And this is a product that really showcases our technology and how we use technology to make great products in the plant-based spectrum. Most people who taste it can't believe that they're tasting a dairy-free product that's plant-based. So really encourage everyone to try it if you can. Churro is my favorite flavor. But let's talk about the technology. That's what I want to really address with the seminar today, because that's really how Ripple was founded. It was really a technology base about how we can use technology with plants to make great products. So the core question we were trying to address about 4 years ago with our founders is, if protein is inherently tasteless, and it is, why do many plant proteins taste bad? And the answer is that they're not pure. Like when you go buy protein from a supplier, you're buying a protein that's usually about 80 to 85% protein and about 15 to 20% other stuff. And that other stuff could be a multitude of things. It could be starches and fibers. There could be isoflavonoids, other phenolics and saponins that are being brought in. And where we focus our energy is how do we minimize those impurities in order to then drive better flavor for the protein that we source. And we really focus on bitter and astringency as the main things we go after to make the great plant-based foods, such as our milks and our ice cream. So we came up with our solve, and we call it Riptine, which is our proprietary protein, which is Ripple protein, hence Riptine. We tagline it the purest plant protein on earth. And this is kind of like the secret sauce of Ripple Foods. And it has a high impact with how we then go about thinking about sourcing down the road. And this is the key part that I want to really drive home, is that we use technology to enable the sourcing flexibility. So we started as a pea protein company, but we never intended to be a pea protein company. We just started with peas because it was meeting our metrics for sustainability. But what we have done is that when we take our technology and apply it, we've done the work to apply it to soy, flax, lentil, and over a dozen more other plant-based sources to come up with the same kind of output of a clean protein that we use in the products. So this is really important for us because while we can grow a plant-based portfolio with peas, it enables us to go after other sources and minimize the impact of any kind of flavor differences through the use of technology. And we're very proud of this. We actually got a grant recently from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and we're focused in Veg News last year, about the work we're doing to improve food systems in developing countries with new protein options. So for instance, with this one, we're working with agricultural sources that are in Africa and what plant sources they have, and then how we can use our technology to make a better tasting protein option for them to put into their products and really create nutrition and to fight world hunger in that region of the world. And this is the stuff that gets us really excited, what gets me really excited to come to work every day. It's the stuff we're doing to make an impact through the use of technology and applying it to plant-based products. But I wish I could tell you that technology is the solve for everything, but it's not. Technology closes gaps, and it closes gaps substantially. But our flavor house partnerships are still needed to ensure that we continue to meet consumer expectations. And we use a lot of sensory science in everything that we do. And the output of our sensory science is then shared with core flavor houses to co-develop kind of proprietary flavor solutions for each Riptine solve we go after, whether it's a pea, a lentil, a flax, you name it. So the key takeaway I want to have from this slide is when you're in this plant protein space, you really want to make sure from a supply perspective, you're partnering with the flavor houses that can really help you optimize and grow. The technology is evolving, the sources are evolving, so the flavor houses that you partner with need to have that flexibility to be able to optimize with you. That's a key part of what we do. And this is just a chart that shows kind of the work we've done in the past. This is from years ago, but this is the work that we do, and we create these spiderweb plots through sensory science that we then share with our flavor house partners. The red is the Riptine, and the blues are other pea protein isolates that we map. And you can see the work that we do to really minimize things like bitter aftertaste or astringency or bitter flavor. And that's really has been the focus of, in this case for peas, how we can minimize those notes coming through. That's been our focus, but realize there's many other attributes to a pea that we want to make sure that we can minimize any of the off flavors from those as well too. So for this one, for instance, we have a beanie flavor coming through. We then focus the efforts of our flavor houses to minimize those beanie flavor notes, but partner with our technology to create a great ice cream or a great milk. But last but not least, I like to put at least a crystal ball out there about what's kind of going to come next in the world of plant-based foods. I do think it is Clean Label. Clean Label has been out there for the food industry for quite some time. And I think plant-based foods have gotten off to a great start, but now you're seeing a lot of labels that have longer ingredient statements and look more processed from an ingredient perspective to the consumer. So I like to give kudos to my teammates at Light Life and Symphony Almond. They really took on this challenge about how to create great tasting products with a simpler ingredient statement. And we'll see how consumers respond. But that's, I think, the trend you're going to see more in the plant-based spectrum, especially as you integrate technology in. Consumers are going to want less processed, more natural ingredients they can understand. This is the work that Ripple is doing right now. And I believe that everyone else is going to be following suit as well, too. So that is what I have for the presentation, and I thank you all. And at this point, I'm happy to take any questions that may be from the audience.
Hi, I'm not Oliver, but he asked me to help out, so I had to quickly put a shirt on, and I'm gonna be helping you and the other guys. I'm part of Rethink. I'm the partnership manager, and just wanted to ask a few questions from the audience around affordability, and you mentioned that a little bit in the slide about the Bill and Melinda Gates grants. Like, how do you work and make plant-based protein more affordable for lower income and get more market access for the people in different part of the globe as you guys scale and work with different partners?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to ask. When it comes to affordability, the way we think about it is we got to first go after the ingredient source that could be a bit lower cost, such as peas. And then the benefit with us is that we've been partnering to scale our technology to then drive costs down. So in a sense, it's kind of like you heard from ROQUETTE and Jean-Philippe. As you scale, it helps to provide affordability and cost. Same thing with technology, but also starts with the incoming kind of material to make sure you're getting the best material and starting there at a cheap source, because a lot of the agricultural products out there are not that expensive. Mm-hmm. It's making sure you can take that and apply a scalable technology to provide a great flavor and a great taste.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, and how do you see sort of specific applications for specific crops as well? Sort of looking at different flavor profiles and leveraging what's already existing from nature to limit sort of additives as well.
So how we just make sure I'm is how do we look at different flavors from or different crops in terms of flavor?
Exactly, and adapting it to formats that might be more adequate based on one crop to another.
Yeah, so when it comes to different crops, I do think it's not about one particular crop. I think it's about how you use things in combination with each other. I think we get focus about, is it a pea or is it a chickpea or is it a lentil? But I think it's a combination of how you work with them together to provide the best flavor overall. So I would encourage folks to not be so isolated in terms of the protein source, but how to use things in combination with each other to provide the best output for the consumer.
And finally, any exciting products, any insights on what's next and for Ripple in different markets that you can share with us, if possible?
Yeah, so I probably can't share everything, but some of the things that you've seen so far, we're going to look to expand them. So our milks and our ice cream got to a fantastic start. We are in the United States, so we just went to Canada most recently, and hopefully go beyond that soon. And I think from a overall perspective of where our focus is at, our tagline is dairy free done right, or dairy free as it should be. Those are two of the taglines we have. So anything that's in that dairy centric space, and you can probably go down the list for any product that's dairy centric, we're going to look to make the plant-based alternative for that in a great tasting way using technology. So kind of read between the lines, but that's kind of the areas we're going to look to explore.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much, Andy. We're now going to switch to Harshal for the next presentation. So let's see if we can make the transition smooth. Here you are, and I'll be the one clicking on the next presentation. Then, so just let me know.
Great. Should we let me try one more time if I can share my screen?
Okay, you try.
Okay. Otherwise, I can give that to you.
Right.
Okay, I think you're going to have to go somehow. The transition is not happening. So if you could please share the presentation, that would be great.
No problem. Let me know if you can all see that.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. So after those two excellent presentations by Jean-Philippe and Andy and a few technical snags, so let's transition to how does the plant-based sourcing operate, and how does it benefit the up-and-coming meat analogs category specifically, and then what does the future hold? So next slide, please. So as we started building the plant-based meat analogs category at Tyson Foods, what we quickly realized is the opportunity to win with the consumer. It really lies on the taste. As you see on the left-hand side of the screen, the main growth that is coming up in this category as it becomes the burgeoning category. And so I've seen predictions such as $5 billion total market cap in a few years. A lot of that growth is going to come from flexitarians who are trying to include this as one more healthy protein option in their lifestyle and diet. So that's where the main barrier, we believe, for them to get to repeat purchase is going to be taste. How does that meat analog actually taste? The juiciness, the crumbliness, the flavor, the taste. It's all going to be number one factor. And that's where some of the other categories have done fairly well. Ripple, that we just heard from, they've done an excellent job in kind of putting taste on the forefront and getting a product experience that is on par with the actual dairy category and offering options therein. And that is just one example. I'm sure there are many. So how do we then build on the work that has happened in the meat analogs category and deliver products that are tasty? So next slide, please. So that's where, when we started this exploration, we quickly realized that we were going to have to develop a portfolio that takes into account taste as a category, and whether it was the chicken nuggets or any of the other products in this portfolio, they will all count on that experience. So on the next slide, then when we went back to the drawing board, we had several excellent and very aggressive, fast-paced innovation sessions between our chefs, Tyson chefs, as well as the embedded chefs from our strategic partners, vendors, our marketing, brand, and consumer team, as well as the food scientists and engineers on the R&D team. Where we looked at several sources, looked at several farming technologies, and came up with products that really delivered on that promise of taste. So on the next slide, that's where you will see the results, where these plant-based nuggets have really kind of been a testament to that positioning, and how taste is making a difference in consumer adaptability. And whether it is social media, mainstream channels, or what we hear from our consumers and customers, the message is consistent, that they are recognizing that the way these products taste and the way they kind of display their overall meat-like attributes has been a winner in terms of product acceptance. And that's the message that we intend to take forward as we expand this portfolio. So that's where, on the next slide, you will see an approach that we recognize, and what Tyson has to bring to this category. So as I already talked about, our culinary expertise in our chefs as well as the embedded chefs, and the difference that they are making to this category, that we are going to launch products in and really be able to do that on a global scale, not just North America or Europe, but eventually in Asia as well. And we will do that through our existing established brands, but also opening new brands that will kind of elevate this category altogether for Tyson Foods. And all of this is made possible by our existing deep relationships with the customers on the retail, food service, and QSR sites. So that would be a winning combination that will enable Tyson Foods to take the initial success of this category and elevate it to the next level as we expand into this portfolio. So on the next slide, then let's talk a little bit and transition to how do we enable this. We recognize, as Jean-Philippe well answered that question, there are several sources from soy to yellow pea to sunflower, canola, mung bean, and there are several more out there that have done quite well. To me, it's really that diversity is important, and it's important to recognize the unique value proposition that each of them are bringing into the table. But it always is a challenge, right? I mean, this is a growing category. Not everyone has all the answers. We do not know where is consumer behavior going to settle. So as this space evolves, as we get more penetration globally, this space will start looking somewhat different, and the collage, the picture that is put together, may include several sources. So on the next slide, let's discuss some of those approaches. So we are very happy to see the several approaches that the industry is taking. So on the left-hand side, you see a plot similar to one that Andy showed, where there are several flavor challenges that come with pea protein have been identified. That's just a research article. And pea protein certainly has come a long way from that initial variation in quality and consistency. But then we are very happy to see that there are several other approaches that are happening that kind of hit that bullseye in terms of taste. So what are these approaches? So first of all, we already talked about novel sources, whether it is fava or chickpea or lentils or azuki bean, or going beyond just the plant proteins and going into things such as mushrooms, fungi, single cell proteins, fermentation, as well as new technologies such as gene editing and computational genomics. I think they are going to drive to the next generation of sourcing and really trying to deliver on the taste and nutrition, availability, and sustainability that the consumer is demanding. Then on the other side, you have the process itself, how you take a source and make that into a sustainable protein isolate or a meat analog, whether it is particle size reduction, wet or dry fractionation, hydrolysis, co-granulation, extrusion. There are several different technologies that are being tried to kind of bridge that gap. Ripple has done some excellent work in that space as well, and there are many more that are actively trying to solve that problem. Fermentation has emerged as a category unto itself almost. When we talk about fermentation, we are talking about really two different kinds of approaches here. Fermentation to protein or fermentation using protein. I think both of those are very promising, and they will offer some distinguished value propositions in the coming year. And finally, masking. Our flavor partners, seasoning partners have done excellent work in launching these maskers that will kind of help us deliver the right top notes, middle notes, and end notes as we try to mimic the meat analog or meat experience within the meat analogs. So those are just some of the different technologies to call out. Certainly, this list is not comprehensive, but it kind of shows where the platform is going and how different sources, different technologies are going to enable us to deliver these great tasting products, and that will win with the consumer, help us get the penetration, the scale, and make plant-based options available to a wider growing population throughout the world. So that's my presentation. We can go to the next slide and go to any questions. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great, thank you so much, Harshal. That was really interesting, and so some of the questions we received from the audience are, interestingly from Richard Williams. So, what are your predictions for precision fermentation in conjunction with plant-based products? Have you guys looked at that at all?
We are aware of the fermentation as a category. Definitely, as I said, it's a promising category, whether we start with a protein or end with a protein. What precision fermentation offers, in my mind, is the de-risking, that you will end with the desired product in desired time and budget. So that's something that is certainly, we are aware of the space and the work that is being done. And it has promise for the future. Where the main challenge is going to be the time. So that's why we have to calibrate that time well and make sure that we incorporate that in our innovation process.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And I mean, another question, Tyson Foods is an incredible, company that has so many ties with retailers, as you mentioned, an incredible network. How are you also leveraging these relationships? You mentioned it a little bit in your presentation, to grow the category, to go further, and using some of the processing and so on, and your incredible expertise internally to also, grow the alternative protein, innovation within Tyson.
Yes, so we recognize that being the size and the expertise that we are, we bring a lot to the table. But at the same time, it takes a village, as they say. So it's not going to be just us. So we are very thankful to the partners that have been holding our hand as we transition into that and incorporate that plant-based category in our portfolio. So we are very open to building that ecosystem with our vendor partners, with universities, with global institutions in launching these next generation products.
Thank you. And I think perhaps last questions. If for new startups, actually for new entrants in this space, and who are interested in this industry, there was a question from Maria. What is your advice for new food technologies and startups as well, who are interested to work in this space, potentially also work with you on these new challenges?
Yeah, so having worked in a startup myself, I'm always I'm a champion of startups, and we through our incubator network, we do look at a lot of these new technologies that come in. So my advice would be focus and validation. So I think that's what we look for. So if that startup has been able to focus on getting a distinguished technology and any work that they have done for its consumer validation, taste validation, or regulatory as such. So that offers you a great leg up against anybody else you may be competing with when you pitch your technologies to large CPGs or ingredient players, and set yourself apart in that crowding field.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think now we can bring the other speakers back for a bit of a Q&A answer with the rest as well. Let me know if you can all hear me. Here we go. So perhaps starting with you, Jean-Philippe, you're about to launch the biggest, plant-based processing plant in the world in Canada. And perhaps we could start with you by would you tell us a little bit more about why, how, and what this means for the industry as well?
Yes, so the plant we are going to take delivery of the plant in December. We will start producing the first quarter of next year, and as you mentioned, it's the largest plant for food protein globally in our space, right? What does it bring to our industry? Well, I'm again delighted to have Harshal and Andy here on the call, two great food companies. We will have protein. I think what it brings is that the confidence, the reliability that the supply is going to exist, high quality, sustainable, good farming practices. I mean, everything you've heard from Andy and Harshal, that's what we are putting in motion in those companies, but also in ROQUETTE. That's what we strive for. That's what we get up in the morning for, right? So we will have supply. It will be sustainable. It will be close to you, right? In Canada for Andy, well, actually for Harshal as well. In Europe for the European customers. And it will be coming from the pioneer and leader of the technology and of the space, historical leader ROQUETTE. I think there are many other things, but I would stress this one because I guess it's probably the biggest impact of what we are bringing to the market.
Okay, thank you. Another question also perhaps interesting as well, and I know whether Harshal or Andy wants to answer that. So does soy still has any space in the future? So looking at new sources, but also traditional ones.
Yeah, I can jump in.
I can answer from the. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I'll jump in first, and Harshal, feel free to tag along. But
Yeah, we can answer all three of us. Yeah, that's right.
my short answer is yes. I think soy definitely has a role. Soy has been proven. It's been a great foundational ingredient. It comes with some baggage against it in the past, whether it's an allergen or estrogen kind of stuff. But in the end, it's about the flavor and the delivery to the consumer. And again, I think it's going to not just be a soy only thing. It's a combination of soy plus whatever else you can bring to the table to make a great product. So I do think it has a role. It's just defining its role in a combination of other sources, I think is going to be where it can take off even further.
Okay. Harshal?
Yeah, I completely agree. So soy does have a role, and we've been looking at some soy 2.0 technologies as well, and what they have to offer here. So that unique biochemical mix of proteins that soy offers, very few other legumes have matched that, but there are some others on the horizon that have the potential. But because of that, the kind of functionality that they bring in, soy and other soy-like legumes are going to be fairly unique. So it would be helpful to have them included, if not solely, but at least as a part of the blend to get to those desired functionalities.
Yeah, so let me maybe add to this. I'm on the same page as ROQUETTE. We're on the same page. We would not exclude any source, that can give us a diversity of mixtures and the flavor and then functionality. Now, if you look at sustainability, I guess the point would be for soy, as for the other crops, to improve the social acceptance, or fix some of the reputational, and just improve the sustainability. And that would be a good challenge for soy growers that we would help as well. As a company to grow and to make it a good, well-received, sustainable source of vegetable protein.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. And maybe for Andy more specifically as well, let's talk about the consumer. How do they perceive different types of sources of protein? What are your thoughts on that? So do you perceive any consumer preferences for each protein, soy versus pea versus another one? How do you combine marketing with this research as well on sourcing?
Yeah, I think the role for many of them. And in the end, I do think it comes down to if we can deliver against the expectation for the consumer. So if they're seeing a plant-based source on the ingredient statement, delivers a great functionality and flavor, I think you can go after many different kind of sources. So I don't think it's going to be just selective in terms of one or the other. I do think that there is a segmentation though that has to be accounted for when it comes to an allergen sensitive consumer or consumer who has a sensitivity against certain ingredients. To counter that, that's why we went after allergen-free kind of positioning for some of our products. And I see that across with, especially in the vegan space, there's a lot of that interconnectivity with allergen and vegan. So I think that's a part of the decision matrix. But again, I think it's more of a segmentation about which consumer target you go after.
Thank you. And for my two other speakers, actually, I'd like to ask you the same question. You've also done some consumer studies. What are you seeing in terms of consumer demand for certain traits and certain categories of plant protein as well, and acceptance?
Yeah, we are seeing this one. Taste, of course, is essential. Now, remember, diversity is key because of taste, texture. Nutritional aspect is also important. We in the end, we also need to feed, and it's not only Americans or Europeans. It's 2 or 3 billion people living in Asia and Africa who needs nutritional food as well for their children and themselves. So these aspects are what constitutes, what we're looking for, right? And this is why diversity is so important.
Yeah, I think the consumer at large has been very accepting and somewhat forgiving as well as this category comes up. But as we expand this category into the future, collectively, we are going to have to ascertain that we continue meeting the demands as consumers' preferences become more crystallized, and what exactly is the consumer looking for. So it may be taste, it may be nutrition, it may be sustainability, it may be affordability. So different markets are going to have different demands, and so we always try to keep a pulse on where the trends are moving and how can we keep up with it. And there is a regional point to that, like Jean-Philippe mentioned.
Thank you. And perhaps one last question for everyone as we're about to end. If you could choose one product that hasn't perhaps been completely sort of disrupted by the plant-based category, or perhaps one product you're the most excited about for the consumer to have as a plant-based version, what would it be? Perhaps starting with you, Jean-Philippe, and then Harshal, and then finishing with Andy?
It would be, for me, it would be the product which I've never tried, I've never tasted, and a taste which I would have to invent and I would love. That's what we would be. Something that doesn't exist today.
Okay, thank you. Harshal?
So it's hard to answer that question, but it's there are several wishes, right? It's really not one, but a wish list. But whatever we look at as kind of the Mount Everest right now, whether it is sushi, ahi tuna, steak, what we think of that we can never replace, or some very exceptional cheeses in Andy's world. So that's where if I can get those indistinguishable plant-based analogs, I would love to see that.
Thank you. And Andy, to finish?
Sure. Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint an exact one to everyone's point, but I think if I was to take a stab at it, I'm seeing a lot of great innovations on the alternate meat area. I'd love to see more in the fish kind of spectrum too. So I think that I've seen some great innovations. I think there should be more to come. I think in the dairy space, Harshal said it. It's I think cheese. I think cheese is a big one. I think that I've seen a lot of innovations and a lot of great work. I think there's more work that can be done.
Well, this is so exciting for us and for the whole audience. So thank you everyone for joining us. It's been a really insightful session. Apologies again for the technical challenges, but this happens in the COVID world. But I'm so glad we're able to have an insightful conversation. So unfortunately, our time is up. I'd like to thank all of our speakers and conclude with a little finalizing note. I'd like to also invite you all to join our next event in December, the Future Food Tech Summit, New York on December 2nd, December 3rd, which will also be online and focusing on the east side of the US and the North American ecosystem in general. But again, thank you for this fascinating conversation, and you can always contact the speakers separately. I'm sure they'll be happy to answer any of your questions. But for the time being, I'd like to say goodbye and have a good afternoon, a good evening, and a good morning for some of you, everyone. And thanks for joining.